Great. Thank you all for coming out today. Today we are excited to talk about our Threat Assessment and Management Unit, or our TAM unit. Today we have speaking, I'll introduce you, Chief Kevin Davis, who needs no introduction. We have Deputy Chief Eli Corey. He is our Deputy Chief of Police for Investigations. We have Major Chris Edmonds. He is our commander for our Organized Crime and Intelligence Bureau. We have Director Amy Lay, who is our director of our Northern Virginia Regional Intelligence Center. We have Lieutenant Aaron Spooner, who is our deputy director of our Northern Virginia Regional Intelligence Center. And we have Sergeant Amanda Paris, who is the sergeant in charge, or the supervisor in charge of our TAM unit and our ESRO coordinator. So with no further delay, I will introduce you to speak about the TAM unit, Chief Davis.
Thanks, Katie, and thank you all for coming. You probably haven't seen, for those who regularly attend our press conferences, so many people standing up here on the podium. So the topic that we want to introduce has many different moving parts. So that's why there's so many folks up here, because we think that we are putting something together that will take a lot of investigative needs and consolidate them under one umbrella that we are calling our Threat Assessment Management Unit. It's a squad of detectives who will do nothing but investigate active violence incidents, bomb threats, and emergency substantial risk orders. So AVIs, that's the modern vernacular for what used to be called active shooter, and then the phrase or the terminology, the nomenclature changes to active threat, and now the industry nomenclature is active violence incidents, or AVIs. And while that's not necessarily new to our profession, the volume certainly is. So you'll see some statistics, and they're in front of you right now. The number of AVIs that the Fairfax County Police Department investigates and responds to has increased dramatically, particularly post-COVID. We're seeing this regionally, we're seeing this across the country, so that's not unique to Fairfax County. But what I think what is unique is our approach to it all. Bomb threats, when we talk about bomb threats, those continue to rise, and they're steady this year compared to last year. And really what's really new, and a new addition to our tool belt to keep people safe, the emergency substantial risk orders, sometimes called the red flag laws. So we continue to lead the Commonwealth of Virginia with the number of emergency substantial risk order events that we handle here in Fairfax County. And to recap, it's a temporary seizure of firearms from persons who are in crisis. They're either in mental health or behavioral crisis, or they're involved in some domestic violence scenarios, and we confiscate their firearms for a period of up to 180 days. And we believe that keeps families safer. We believe it keeps communities safer. And we're glad and happy to be leading the way. So we've always prided ourselves in being an early adopter, a trendsetter, an agency that not only follows best practices in policing, but establishes best practices. And we like to think that the establishment and the announcement of a threat assessment management unit will be contagious. We are not just going to serve Fairfax County. We're meeting in the coming days with a number of regional law enforcement agencies, and we're going to introduce and talk strategy with them to see how they too can participate in what hopefully will be a regional approach to these incidents. These folks that are typically involved in these scenarios, they do not honor jurisdictional boundaries, and we often find ourselves talking about the same individuals who go from one location, one jurisdiction to another and to another. And then finally, before I turn it over to Chief Corey, a lot of these investigations are occasionally assigned to detectives who have other responsibilities. So the risk in that is that we assign these very important follow-up investigations to detectives as an additional other duty as assigned, if you will. So we think by standing up a team that will or already are rather, subject matter experts in the field, we think we'll have more quality investigations, and we won't run into the scenario of having detectives who are a jack of all trades and master of none, because the expertise required to do this job well is unique. And this is not just a retrospective investigation. We intend, and we already are, engaging in diversion efforts. We're trying to be left of boom. So if we anticipate that there's going to be a problem, there's going to be an explosion, a behavior, an act of violence, a dispute, we will now have the capacity to better respond to that person who is a danger not only to his or her family and his or her community, but a danger to himself or herself as well. So we intend to interdict, we intend to prevent, we intend to divert, and we will, in no doubt in my mind, in very short order, establish a national model to address these issues that continue to dominate our conversations locally and across the country. So I will turn it over to Chief Corey to talk some more details.
Thank you, Chief. So you can see what the Chief was talking about, the number of acts of violence incidents throughout the past few years are on the increase. Just this year alone, we have 153 compared to 73 last year, and more and more every year. We also know that guns are associated with AVIs, and with this fairly new mechanism, the ESRO laws, it gives us the ability to take guns from people who are in crisis. Just this year alone, we have issued 77 ESRO orders, and it's up significantly from the past few years. Bomb threats are also on the rise from years past, but we're always looking for that new and innovative way to deter people and prevent crime. So for the past year, Lieutenant Spooner and Director Lay have been researching this idea of a threat assessment and management team. They went around to other parts of the country looking for good examples. There were a few that they were able to find, and that helped them craft what we have here today in the Fairfax County Police Department. On August 28th of this year, we stood up our own threat assessment and management team. The foundation of this team is to prevent things from happening. You know, we know that when something bad happens like an AVI, there's typically a timeline we're able to trace back. And when we look at that timeline, usually early on, we see that someone has a grievance or something they're unhappy about. And that usually morphs into some sort of violent ideation, continued along with research and planning of an attack, and then some preparation, some probing, and in worst case scenario leads to an AVI or an attack. But recognizing this escalation of events, the TAM unit's purpose is to intercede all along the way before it gets to that attack. So the new unit's responsibility is not only bomb threats, AVIs, but also ESROs for the Fairfax County Police Department. We have several detectives who are subject matter experts. We have analysts that are going to help them along the way. And in addition to those, we have what's called a multidisciplinary team. So we know often it's not enough for people who are in crisis to just get services from the police department. They need other organizations in the community that can help them divert from committing a crime. So this multidisciplinary team consists of Community Services Board, the Neighborhood and Community Services, the Department of Family Services, federal partners, local partners, and even some of our universities in the area like George Mason University and the Northern Virginia Community College. And with these partnerships, we can provide a holistic approach to preventing people on the path of violence. It's too often that we learn after a tragedy occurs that there's opportunities we could have interceded to stop something bad from happening. And the TAM unit's ultimate goal is prevention. And what can we provide you? What services can we help you connect with that will ultimately stop you or prevent you from making a bad decision? And while our TAM unit's only been in existence for a couple weeks, I'm comforted to know that we've assembled a very strong unit with great detectives who are subject matter experts in our community that we can sleep well at night knowing that they're on the job keeping us safe. And with that, I'll turn it over to the Chief for questions.
Any questions? Julie Carey. I will start with you every time now.
It would seem that then, a lot of some of the emergency protection orders are from family members or loved ones. I know you can initiate. Do you think in the short term, then this will mean that your department is initiating more of these? And would you expect the numbers to go up because of this unit? What's your expectation?
Thank you. I do expect them to go up. Sergeant Amanda Paris has been our resident subject matter expert for a while. She's been doing, she's been tasked with a multitude of duties, and now that she's full-time on just ESROs, she's probably best poised to answer that question and maybe make a prediction. Sarge.
Yes. Thank you, Chief. Yes, I would definitely say we are definitely in the realm of beating last year's numbers. Generally, officers just go ahead, they respond to a call for service, and they realize that through that they need to go ahead and obtain an emergency substantial risk order, that there is an individual who's a substantial risk to either themselves or others by either being in possession or trying to acquire a firearm. Therefore, we're going to go ahead and obtain that emergency substantial risk order to temporarily get them the help that they need so that they can go ahead and get their firearms back to them.
Sergeant, can you tell us about your multidisciplinary team? Is that something that's brand new or something that you guys have been using in the past couple of years when you've been getting the ESRO?
So this is brand new to our TAM unit. Our multidisciplinary team is following best practices that we have as well. And so being able to utilize these, our emergency substantial risk orders is a great prevention tool, violence prevention tool that we have. Being able to use our multidisciplinary team can go ahead and help these individuals get services that they might not know is available to them, might not know that's out there, instead of necessarily going a criminal route.
Have you utilized them yet? Have you pushed the button for that?
We have been able to utilize our multidisciplinary team at this time, and they've been a great asset to helping individuals.
Can you say how, more specifically?
The cases are still active and ongoing, so at this time I'm not going to be able to talk on specific cases.
I'm just wondering what kind of services you guys are directing people to.
Yeah, temporary detention orders, working with families to get psychiatric services, wellness services. We can talk generally about what some of those things are: ECOs, emergency commitment orders, temporary detention orders, helping families help their loved ones and walking them through that, so we're not on the right side of boom, going backwards with an investigation retrospectively, which we normally, as a profession, find ourselves in a retrospective investigative posture all too many times. So whether it's services, whether it's hospitalization, temporary detention orders, emergency commitment orders, or simply visiting a home with our clinicians and our co-responder teams. That's another relatively new tool in our toolbox. So whether it's peer support, whether it's our mobile crisis teams, we have a lot of layers to our onion. Peer support, we have mobile crisis, we have co-responder teams, and now we're going to have a threat assessment management unit that's going to oversee it all and make sense of it all. So we're not delivering one service great one day and then not so great the next day. So we'll have a consistent team of detectives who will do this work. We're looking for consistency.
If I could jump in, Chief. So the multidisciplinary team is really something new for our area. So for example, when someone sends out a tweet that may be concerning, we're going to assemble that team. The investigators are going to continue to investigate like we've always have, but they have an additional layer of expertise and training to deal with these type of cases. But then the multidisciplinary team gets together to see what they can provide this person at the stage they're in right now, as opposed to just reacting to what has happened at the moment. So it's really a continuation of providing services after something initially happens, as opposed to investigating it, finding out maybe they don't have the means or the capability of continuing on with what they have said they would in the tweet, but also following them a little bit farther to provide services so that doesn't resurface in the future.
Is this the CSB, the Community Services Board, that's providing these, or the police?
It's a combined team, so they are part of it. CSB is part of that,
Right.
with the police, with DFS, with the schools. It's a whole unified front.
I'm trying to envision, so, part of this team will be together, deployed every day. They have an office where they are going to work. How much of this are they going to be generating from, scouring the internet and looking for online threats? How much is going to come from the outside. I'm just
Yep.
trying to better envision
Sure.
how they operate on a daily basis and where their material comes from.
So if we can go back to the slide, the ESRO slide, who's controlling that? So I'll tee up Lieutenant Spooner to comment and talk about that. What does a typical ESRO look like? And why just in 3 years ago did we have 5 and now we have 77? So what does it look like? A lot of them come from our school community. Some come from our community at large. But LT, why don't you just, between you and Sergeant Paris, kind of walk through what a typical ESRO looks like to include the police response resources required now to deal with that. So that's a big thing. Whenever we have I don't know, am I allowed to say tweet? I don't know what the word for X is, but whenever we have a social media post that used to be on Twitter that's now on X, and it's threatening and concerning in nature, we have to respond to that in real time, and it takes patrol officers and detectives. So LT, between you and Sergeant Paris, kind of walk through what that looks like, and if you can use an example or two, that'd be great. A lot of these things are protected because HIPAA certainly prohibits us from talking about people by name, and we don't want to give away too much there. But I think generally, let's talk about what a typical ESRO event looks like to include the amount of police resources that's required.
Thank you, Chief. So an ESRO or TAM case can come through a multitude of ways. We have social media posts that a concerned community member will report to us. We have community members that hear something or see something that's a behavior indicator that will report to us. And also we do have intelligent analysts who will scour the internet to look at open source media and draw things to our attention of concern. So for investigators, once we receive the case, a detective will be assigned the case. They will see if there's a mean or intent, or if this is, someone's right as a citizen, community member to exercise their free speech. As detectives investigate the case, if it rises to the level where an ESRO is needed, then they will assist the officer or they will go down to the manager and obtain an ESRO. This will occur if there's a direct threat or if they feel that someone is in mental health crisis. And this is just a temporary taking seizure of the weapons. This is not long-term. This is a temporary seizure for them to get the assistance that they need. For detectives, if this does rise to the level of a threat assessment management case, then we incorporate our multidisciplinary team because we look at this as a holistic approach on how to make a community member off the pathway of targeted violence. What we want to do is intervention through different services. Fairfax County is a very service-rich environment. However, not all community members know what services are provided to them. So we want to make sure that we curtail the services to the community member to their specific situation. So that's how we incorporate the multidisciplinary team. We talk with the team members, see what services are best applicable for that individual and how to get them off the pathway of targeted violence to address their grievance. We also, if it does rise to legal authority, then we will write search warrants. Detectives will be talking to several family members, talking to different people in the individual's life to see what grievance they have and how they can help them. These cases are long-term management for the detectives. This is something that a grievance doesn't just go away overnight. So they will be doing long-term case management. They will be making sure they reach out to the service providers and make sure they are getting the services they need. They kind of do the case management while other entities in the Fairfax County government provide the services.
So can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
So give me an example, maybe even a hypothetical, of what's going to rise to the level of activating and involving the TAMs?
Sure. So a lot of days you'll see kind of posts on Twitter or social media, but a lot of the community members don't have the intent or the means. However, if we do start doing some detectives do some investigative steps, see that they do have firearms, see that they have grievances, see that there's behavior indicators or something that's abnormal for that individual, or they're starting to back away from their friends and family members, then obviously we will activate the threat assessment management multidisciplinary team.
It's one of those announcements where over time we're going to have a lot of success stories. We do have several already, but we just thought it was the most appropriate thing to do now where we are in society, where we are with these threats. They're not waning, but it requires a greater, more coordinated response from from the police department. We think with our regional partners in Northern Virginia, we'll look at this as a region and get better at it, because we don't want to gather for a press conference or a news conference. That's right a boom. Something already has happened. And while prevention is not always newsworthy, and you can't count something that didn't happen, we're going to do the best we can to quantify the number of interventions and diversions that this unit is going to be responsible for.
Chief, can you elaborate? You mentioned how they could be connected to the school community. Just to be clear, how these cases are connected?
Well, the FCPS, a close partner to the FCPD, we're in constant communication. Sometimes there will be typically a social media post that circulates throughout a high school or even a middle school at times, and the immediate connection between Fairfax County Public Schools and Fairfax County Police Department takes place. And we've gotten really good at mitigating some of these threats because they've happened so often in the post-COVID years. And a lot of the mitigation you'll never hear about. It's someone who has no means to do it and no intent. But we have to immediately examine intent and means. And if those boxes are checked, a real intent and a means to do it, i.e. the possession of a firearm inside the home, typically by a parent, then that's where we consider our emergency substantial risk order options. So all that happens very, very quickly. Sometimes a young person in crisis, I had a rotary dial phone, so this never happened back then, but a young person who's in crisis will immediately take to social media to air a concern, a dispute, and ultimately we're looking for that person, whether it's a student or someone else elsewhere in the community who has a grievance. That we're looking for a grievance, and then we're looking for means and intent. And then when means and intent kick in, then we take it to the next level, and we make sure that those firearms are not immediately accessible. So a grievance, anger, and immediate accessibility to firearms are a recipe for disaster anywhere in this country.
What kind of pushback have you had from Second Amendment groups, friends of the NRA, anybody who objecting to this? There are jurisdictions that aren't using this at all.
Yeah, we're proud of the fact, and we think that our judicious use of emergency substantial risk orders is consistent with the expectations of our community in Fairfax County. This is not a conversation about the Second Amendment. This is a real world conversation about persons in crisis who have a grievance and have access to firearms. We don't want to wait for something tragic to happen, because all too often when something tragic happens, we sit around and we lament that we knew that was coming. We suspected that was coming. We're not surprised that little Johnny did this. No one intervened. So we think that we have the responsibility to intervene. And intervention is not always a pair of handcuffs. In fact, intervention is rarely a pair of handcuffs. So I think if people want to distort this and look at it as some type of attack on the Second Amendment, they're not looking at it clearly. We believe the world is round. It's not flat. So I think we have a responsibility in public safety to see things that are potential dangers to persons and schools and communities and do something about it. And I welcome all those conversations. None of them have really surfaced to an extent that has captivated my attention. That might change now. But we're certainly very thoughtful about it. And we realize sometimes people have a bad day, but they just have a bad day on social media. If someone has a bad day behind a keyboard on social media, and we determine they don't have an intent and they don't have a means to harm others, then we walk away from it with a conversation. And that happens a lot. But I don't think we're in a place in society where we can just keep saying the rosary and a Hail Mary or two, hoping that something bad doesn't happen when we have signs that something tragic, deadly, violent may in fact happen.
You're on the record about the whole world is round thing.
Well, there's an old saying, and I don't know, one of the Sisters of Providence who taught me in grade school said some people think the world is flat and the world is actually round. So what I mean by that is, it's, reasonable people can disagree about things, and that's fine. That's what this country is all about. But this entire threat assessment management team is in no way, shape, or form has anything to do with the Second Amendment. It's an entirely different apples and oranges conversation.
You mentioned having conversations with regional partners. Can you just list who they are and kind of assess the situation?
Well-
We're seeing it, nationwide, like you mentioned, but in the region, I mean,
Yeah.
Stafford's been having, the first school week, it was a whole bunch of, these threats and
Right.
assessing.
Yeah, well, Raphael, we're in the process right now of having those conversations with our regional partners, because eventually we're going to have an ask to participate in this endeavor. It requires MOUs and memorandums of agreement, because we think that this threat assessment management team will be stronger if the region were represented by detectives and those types of commitments. So that conversation is underway. So I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Everyone is challenged by personnel shortages to varying degrees. So we understand that that's always a consideration that a police chief has to make before he or she decides to assign assets elsewhere. But we're having those conversations, and we hope to continue to demonstrate the value of this team. And we think over time, everyone's going to want to be a part of it, because we'll be able to serve not only Fairfax County, but other jurisdictions in Northern Virginia.
Can I have a kind of off-topic one? But I know that Manhattan, DC, any indication that this guy they're looking for, he escaped George Washington Hospital, is in Fairfax County?
None whatsoever. So we're involved in all those briefings and conversations, but we don't have any information that the escaped prisoner has any connections to Fairfax County. Anybody else?
So where the hell is he?
I'm not Nostradamus, but I will say over 3+ decades, this happens where there's an escaped prisoner. Typically, the apprehension is sooner rather than later, so it's definitely a bit unusual that it's taken a bit to locate this person. I'd venture to say that he'll be located, and I'd venture to say that a person or persons is probably aiding and abetting him right now, and no doubt in my mind, they'll be held accountable when the time comes.
Very Nostradamus-like.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you all so much for coming out. We'll be sure to post on our blog all the details about our TAM unit. We'll put those out for you, all these pictures that you should have, and you can always follow us for more information on our TAM unit and others at Fairfax County PD. Thanks.